Hello, here it's a presentation on one of our surgical procedures for ceramic implants. In this case, two implants were placed, and here we're going to be looking at the placement of the second implant. So as you see, the patient is anesthetized. The flap design is very the classic. You start with a crestal and you extend intrasulcularly, separate the soft tissue from the bone using, in this case, the periotome number 7. You expose the bone both buccally and palatally so that you can see the full ridge. It's always safe to be able to have a complete view of the ridge at the moment when you're getting ready for your osteotomy. So here we have the bone exposed. The area was previously grafted. And we start now our osteotomy with a round burr. Okay, and this is just to decorticate. Then it's followed by the second drill, which is the pilot drill, to start the depth and the first width. And in this case, you might have noticed I'm not using irrigation, but it's because the drills are pretty sharp and don't heat up. Then we place a guide pin. We take a mirror and assess the position before we proceed to the next drill size. And we still go to depth, but we just make the space wider for the placement of the second implant in preparation for the implant osteotomy. Now in this case, we're trying to place an implant that's a diameter of 4.0 and a length of 10 millimeters. So you see we're in our third drill, which is the final drill before we proceed with the insertion of the implant. And what you want to be always careful is to keep the direction of the implant. Now the last drill is basically to give the final width, which is always slightly a little smaller than the size of the implant, so that once you decide to place an implant, you have enough retention. And you always want to, again, check the position, the angulation, in order to have your implant go where your initial drill had planned it for. Now at this point, you see the implant is being inserted at very slow speed. We're going about 20 rotations per minute with a torque of about 40 Newton centimeters. Again, you remember I said the osteotomy is drilled smaller and the implant is inserted with a relatively high torque into the osteotomy. Like this, you get a good primary stability and you finish the implant insertion with a ratchet, which is usually set at around 50 to 55 Newton centimeters. And the sutures are, in this case, for example, are pretty simple. You just put a suture on the mesial, and the material used here is Gore-Tex. So it's non-resorbable, but it's very hygienic. It doesn't retain plaque. In this case, the abutment was a little long. It had a little bit of an interference with the opposing teeth, so we reduced abutment using a fine grit diamond burr with a lot of irrigation. In this case, you definitely need the irrigation when you are trimming down the zirconia. And a regular high-speed handpiece is adequate. And then, in order to make sure the implant has good stability, we use a periotest, which is a device that taps on the implant, as you can see, and it gives you a value that you can use to determine if the implant is pretty stable. And in this case, it was stable, and we also protected the implant with the S6 appliance. so that when a patient is eating or sleeping, they can wear that even during the day and not be tempted to push the abutment of the implant with their tongue.